Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for joining this webinar on net energy. You are more than 960 registered, and actually we see the connection going up and up and up. So you are 260 connected yet. And do not be frustrated if you cannot ask your own question. The chat is there for further discussion. A few months ago, we organized a series of short videos, we called short educational videos, to explain the basics of net energy. And this short series was entitled Net Energy, Everything You Wanted to Know About Any But Were Afraid to Ask. With the famous Dr. Jean NOBLET, and the attendance today reveals that it's really a famous guy. So these videos are available on the web platform, feedchannel.online. We indeed thought worthwhile to give easy tools to understand the basics of net energy. And now it's time to interact and question our expert. We are thus pleased to welcome today Jean NOBLET. Jean spent his whole career at ex-INRAe, now INRAE, developing science around energy utilization in swine, and he particularly developed the net energy approach, releasing any equations that are now used in the field. More recently, he continued by developing the NE approach in poultry, in collaboration, for instance, with a team of Professor Min-Gan Chok, Bob Swick, Shu-Biao Wu from University of New England in Armidale, Australia. To conduct that webinar, we have the great pleasure to have one of Jean's last PhD students, now research manager at ICEO, Dr. Pierre Cozonet, and myself, one of his first students. So I'm not the expert on the topic, but we have two experts around the table. So you can imagine the pressure on our shoulders, Pierre and I. Pierre did his PhD on energy value of DDGs in all species, and he was really trained and educated by Jean. So we remind you that the objective of this webinar is not to give a 1 hour formal presentation on net energy. This webinar will better address all questions you may still have after the series of short videos on net energy posted on feedchannel. However, to give the context and start this webinar, we asked Jean to rapidly give the key points or basis of net energy approach for swine and poultry. Again, he will show that pigs and poultry have the same issues and the same benefits moving to NE. And after Jean's introduction, we'll open the question to all of you through the chat. You can start a question at any time. Feel free. There is no stupid question, only question to better understand net energy and its challenges. Moreover, only your first name will appear when posting your questions on the chat, so don't be shy. And all questions will be either answered directly by Jean or Pierre, or the response will be posted later on the feedchannel platform. Everything, the webinar, the replay, and the answer will be available, I would say, in a couple of days on the feedchannel platform. So Jean, the floor is yours, and we start the webinar.
Okay, thanks Pierre-André for the introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, or to all people connected. Also, I would thank the beginning of this webinar, the Additives organization, for this webinar, and also for the short educative videos that were published or presented 2 or 3 months ago. So if you haven't seen these videos yet, I encourage you to look at them. So anyway, I think as indicated by Pierre-André, this webinar is mainly composed of question and answer. So don't hesitate for that. But just before starting, I would give a few slides in order to summarize what was given and the key points about net energy in poultry and in pigs. So as you can see on that first slide, I think when we talk about energy utilization, we start from gross energy, and then we move to DE and to ME, and then to net energy. I will not detail all these steps, but I will focus mainly today on, I think the question will answer all these points, about the last part of this diagram, talking about K, which is the ratio between net energy and ME, about heat increment, and about the calculation and the measurement of net energy, which is the addition of energy gain plus fasting in production. So next slide, how do we measure energy gain? I think there are different techniques or different methods for doing that. I think comparative slaughter methods and so on and so on. But I think nowadays, I think most techniques are based on the calorimetry and more precisely the indirect calorimetry method. So what do we do for calculating energy gain in the indirect calorimetry method? We obtain energy gain as the difference between ME intake by the animals minus their heat production. But for measuring this ME intake and this heat production, there are some points to be careful. First, we are talking about diets, and so the animal should be adapted to the diet. I have put 5 to 10 days, and I think that's a minimum to adapt an animal to a new diet. So for measuring, for using the indirect calorimetry method, we use so-called respiration chambers, which is a closed room, and I think it's important to adapt the animal to this new environment, and that should be at least for 1 day. Further, afterwards, you have to measure the heat production per se, and I think you need at least 2 or 3 days, or even 5 days, and that should be done under very standardized and representative conditions. And that's very important for interpreting the data afterwards. So be careful, for instance, if you see net energy measurements conducted over only 1 day, even less than 1 day, I think you should be very careful in the interpretation of the data. So at the same time, you measure the animal in the respiration chambers, you can measure the ME intake. And at the end, net energy is calculated as energy gain plus fasting reproduction. So in the short videos, fasting reproduction was fully detailed and described how to obtain these values. So what I want to insist at that stage is that measuring net energy is rather complex. I think you need equipment, you need to calibrate, you need very routine methods, and that's not easy. That's time consuming, that's a long-term response. I mean, you don't get the response only 1 day. You need weeks and even months for measurements, and that's expensive, and so on and so on. So I consider that measuring net energy is more a research activity. So next slide, I will insist on another point which is important, and I will talk about that today, I think, during the questions. That's what do we listen or what do we understand by net energy system? I think a net energy system is equivalent to one net energy equation. Clearly, net energy, in practical terms, is not measured. It is calculated from an equation. These equations can be obtained according to different methods, but usually these equations come from the combination of net energy measurements that are conducted on very well-balanced and variable diets under very controlled, standardized, and representative conditions. So the videos explain that a little bit. So which type of models are we using for calculating these equations? Usually we use linear regression models where net energy is calculated as a function of the amount of digestible nutrients in the feed, or it is a function of the DE or DME content plus some correction factors, or it can even be net energy as a function of some indirect measurements such as in vitro or infrared indicators. So clearly net energy, and we talk about that today, is calculated from an equation. Next slide. So what's the situation for the two groups of animals we have to deal with today? I think for pigs, the net energy prediction equations, they are available, they are validated, or they have been validated, they are quite robust, and as a consequence, they are today, I think, widely used in feeding tables and in the feed industries all over the world. For poultry, the situation is a bit different. I think there are some equations available, but these equations have not been fully validated, and one consequence of that, but there are also other reasons, is that net energy is not much yet used in practice. So that means that in order to be more convincing about using net energy in poultry, we should do some additional research. Next slide, for illustrating how what's the difference between pigs and broilers. So on that table, I have put some typical ingredients, or soy oil, corn, wheat, and soybean meal. You know about the chemical composition of these ingredients, which are totally different. What you can see first is that the ratio between net energy and ME is different according to this the chemical composition of the ingredients. For oil or for full fat sources, I mean, the efficiency is quite high, 90%. For the cereals, it's somewhere in the middle, 80%. And for soybean meal, it is much lower, about 60%. But I show that slide mainly to illustrate or to focus on the comparison between pigs and broilers. I mean, these values were calculated from two sets of equations, one published by ex-INRAe for pigs and one published by the University of New England in Australia for broilers. You can see that pigs and broilers are behaving very similarly in terms of efficiency of ME for net energy. So nowadays we are using net energy very routinely for pigs. So why shouldn't we use also net energy for broilers in the future according to such data? So the last slides for this introduction will show what should be done in practice for the feed industry organization. So as I said before, net energy value of diets and of ingredients is calculated from an equation or a system. So the important point there is to decide on one equation or one system, and preferably one system that has been validated on diets and on ingredients. So I think I will stress also on one point, which is very important, is that some research organizations, some groups in the world are measuring DE, net energy value of ingredients. In my opinion, I think there is no need to measure net energy of ingredients. But in the case of ingredients, what is important is to get DE or ME values or digestible nutrients, which are quite reliable, which have been updated and so on, in order to calculate or to include these values afterwards in the net energy equation. Last point before moving to the question is that net energy values from different origins, I mean different equations, different labs and so on, cannot be combined. You should be very careful about that. And so again, you need to decide on one system or one equation in order to calculate and to implement net energy in your company. So that's all for the introduction. That's a summary of the short videos we presented 2 or 3 months ago. And so now I think we can move to questions, and we try with Pierre and Pierre-André to answer all of them or most of them.
Thank you very much, Jean. So as you say, now it's time for the debate. And because we received quite a lot of questions, we decided to structure maybe into 3 parts the debate. First one would be back to the basics of any from measurements, calculations, and so on. Second part would be practical use of any in feed formulation. And the third part would be the benefits and consequence of any to assess performance, to evaluate feed additives, and so on. So let's start the questions and answer by the first part. So I would say back to the basics. And we have received different questions. So I will raise up the questions in front of the screen, and we'll start to answer either Jean or Pierre. So the first question by Mark was, can you please address the energy cost of deamination? Why do crystalline amino acids have such high NE values relative to intact protein sources?
Oh, that's a very technical question, I think, for starting. I think the point is that there is some cost of deamination, clearly, when you have some protein excess. You have always some deamination, but that's normal. But the point is that for calculating or for evaluating the net energy of crystalline amino acids, it's impossible to do that experimentally. I think you cannot include, in order to measure the net energy of an ingredient or nutrient, that nutrient or that ingredient should be included at least 5 or 10% or even 20%. That depends on the nutrient or the ingredient. In the case of amino acid, that's impossible technically and methodologically speaking to measure the net energy of crystalline amino acids. So for doing that, you have to do hypothesis. I think that's I have done that for pigs a long time ago, and assuming that when you use crystalline amino acids, the deamination rate is much lower than for the total amino acids of the feed of an ingredient, and so the efficiency of ME for net energy of crystalline amino acids is much higher than it should be according to the efficiency of protein for net energy. So I have no time for getting into more detail about that. That's a very technical question, and at the end, it doesn't make a big difference anyway.
Any point to add, Pierre?
Yes, good morning and good afternoon all. Just to complete also and to add one more comment to Mark's questions, I would also add that compare with vegetable protein or protein meal, synthetic amino acids are fully digestible, and that's also play an important part in the high values in any that this kind of additive may have in the net energy system.
There is one question raised, I'm sure, quite often, is why is this more difficult to get equation for poultry than for swine?
Oh, I think it's the point is we have to look at the history. I think I have prepared a few slides for illustrating some of the questions that might be asked. The slide number 17, for instance, in the list indicates that for poultry, I think there was a lot of work on net energy a long time ago. In the 60s, 70s, and even the 50s, after the Second World War. So that's a long time ago. Unfortunately, these studies were not followed by application in the field. And that's only quite recently that there were new studies conducted on poultry for net energy equation purposes. That was done at ex-INRAe, that was done in Arkansas, that was done in Australia, the UNE, we have talked a bit about that, and that's also in industry. And I think nowadays there are a few programs running in the world for going further in net energy equation. So what I think that's a more or less consequence of the history. I think for let's say 30 or 40 years, poultry nutritionists did not care much about net energy because they were happy with the ME, they were maybe a little bit conservative. They were not using as many ingredients as in the big industry. So there were a lot of reasons for not being too excited about net energy in poultry. So today, there are some new equations in order to predict the net energy. I think the slide number 18, for instance, indicates that there is one equation that is quite recently published in Australia by Shubiao Wu and Bob Swick. I was also implemented in that program a little bit. So clearly, there are some new data coming, and that should change in the future. So I think there is no reason for this difference apart from the history, I would say, and the recent increase in the number of studies conducted on poultry in connection also. I don't know what happened to move for net energy, but there are a few reasons for that.
Thank you, Jean. There is more question on the technical aspects, and Ami, for instance, asked a question. What about the influence of the soluble dietary fiber on net energy? Many NE values are calculated using NDF and do not account for the influence of soluble dietary fiber. Can you address this issue?
Yeah, I think again that's a rather technical questions. I didn't expect. But clearly, one thing that is very, very important when we talk about net energy is that net energy is calculated from DE or ME. So I guess, or I assume that most of the effects of fiber level or fiber composition, or in that case here, sodium dietary fiber, will affect first the DE or the ME content in poultry or in pigs, and afterwards the net energy will be affected according to some variation of the DE or the ME value. I think the transition from ME to net energy is not directly affected by the composition of dietary fiber. That's mainly the ME value or the DE value in the case of pigs that is affected by dietary fiber. So maybe in the future, we'll have to move to more sophisticated criteria for calculating the net energy, or for getting better equations taking into account such criteria as sodium dietary fiber, because there may be some specific effect of dietary fiber on the metabolic utilization of ME. But as far as I know, there is no information on that yet.
Yes, there is maybe no information yet, but in fact, it's a quite important question when we talk about gut health, gut functioning, and so on. You want to add something, Pierre?
No, I would say that I fully agree that some equation take into account neutral detergent fiber, especially the work that was published by Jean in the mid-90s. But for sure, I think that we improved the analytical method for the fiber in diet, and I think that we will have convergences between the chemical capabilities and the prediction of net energy. But for the moment, this work is very scarce.
We have still lots of questions, and for instance, regarding the type of feed. And one question is, what is the impact on the NE value in complex feed compared with single feed like corn, soybean meal diets?
I think that's again a question of DE or ME first. I think when we talk about energy value of diets or formulation packages and so on, we assume that the effects are additive. There is no interaction. So I don't know any data, any clear and convincing information indicating that there are interactions between ingredients or between nutrients, or positive or negative. So I would say that the impact of net energy is fully, the impact of number of ingredients is fully additive, and so I don't see any difference between complex and simple diet or single diet. So what's the difference in addition to that anyway is that when you are using only, I would say, 2 ingredients, corn and soybean meal, it doesn't make a big difference whether you use DE, ME, or net energy. I think you will change a little bit the crude protein content or the amino acids level and so on, but a little difference. But when you are using plenty of ingredients which are available on the market, or I think then the difference between these ingredients or these ingredients are not ranked similarly in the DE, ME, or net energy systems. So that means that you should use, I think the advantage of a net energy system is bigger probably when you are using complex diet than very simple diets.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a lot of questions regarding also the basis. You say that most of the equations are based on AME. So we talk about how to measure this AME, and the first component, I would say, on the AME equation. So one question from Angelique: can I use AME from NIR system to calculate the net energy?
Yes, I think in one of the slides I presented in the introduction, I said that the net energy can be calculated from any good indicator of the DE or the ME or the dietary nutrients content. So nowadays, I mean, the equations which are available are only those based on DE or ME, I mean DE or ME measured values. So why not using or predicting the DE or the ME value of an ingredient or even a diet according to, let's say, infrared methods, and use that prediction for calculating the energy? Yes, I fully agree on that. But the point is that you should be very careful. For instance, when the net energy equation is proposed, it is proposed with ME, or let's say for pigs, I mean, the point is much less important. But for poultry, the net energy equations will be based on ME values, but you should be careful about which ME you are talking about. Is it, I mean, it is very popular to use ME for zero nitrogen balance. So if you use ME for zero nitrogen balance as a predictor, you should use a net energy equation where the ME for zero nitrogen balance is used as a predictor. So be careful when you use equations. Look at the units, look at the definition of the predictors and so on, and use the right equations with the right numbers. So you should be very careful. So why not using infrared values if the infrared are predicting, let's say, AMEN or AMES or AME for layers, for poultry, for breeders, and for, I don't know, any type of animal. So be careful when using net energy equation. Look at the units, look at the predictors. Do they apply to any type of animals and so on?
There is a very interesting point. So, Pierre, you want to add a comment?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with the point of Jean that a lot of caution should be carried on the values of ME that you consider, and many books and many NIR's values are giving the metabolizable energy corrected for zero nitrogen balance, and you should care that your equation is taking these parameters into account. And another comment would be that I think that both the idea of moving to NE is to be closest to the animal requirement and to be more precise. So NIR, the precise nutrition values that you can get having NIR are going in the same way. So for me, the two strategies are going in the same way, moving to NE and using the best values, the best nutritional values of your raw material that you can get.
Jean, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add a comment maybe. I think just because some questions are more focused on poultry, I think it's time to abandon or to move from AMEN in poultry to a more reliable and more representative AME predictor. Clearly, AMEN doesn't means nothing for poultry. I think all the broilers, all the layers in the world are not on the zero nitrogen balance. They are on the 50 or 60% of the nitrogen intake that is retained in the body. So we should move to a much more representative predictor of AME. And I mean, the feeding tables, unfortunately, are mainly based on AMEN, but that should be corrected in the future to move to some standardized AME, which is more representative of the practical conditions.
Yes.
Another question, which is quite interesting, and it's the basis of also the formulation. Are any values of individual ingredients affected when combined with other ingredients? From Jonathan.
I think I think we already answered a bit to that point. Yes, there might be some such problems of interactions. Clearly, but it is very poorly documented. We don't know clear. I have no clear evidence of one ingredient that is very bad or very positive. I don't know exactly. And I mean, one basic principle of formulation, of preparing diets, least cost formulations, is the principle of additivity. So maybe there are some interactions, and I think that's one thing we should look at in the future. Not for me, because I'm too old for that, but clearly interactions are very important. They should not be ignored in the future, but nowadays the information is very poor on that topic, and the tools we are using for formulating are assuming linear and additivity principles.
That's a good transition to the next part of the debate, but before, we organized also small polls. So besides the question file, you see polls, and you get your feedback on what's going on. And thus, you can answer to the polls at any time. And we will get at the end a global overview of the response to the different questions on the polls. So do not hesitate to click on the poll sections and answer to the poll. So the next part of the debate is really focusing on practical use of net energy in feed formulation. What are the main limitations, constraints for feed formulation? And we receive quite a lot of questions regarding the formulation. For instance, one good point from Rick here, knowing the NE values of ingredients is only half of the problem. We need to know what the requirements are on an NE basis as well. How do we do that practically? Who wants to answer?
I can start.
Yeah.
I think that's quite easy, I think. We have to be very practical. And that has been my proposal for pigs. And I think, and it worked. I think for poultry, it should be the same. We know what do you mean by requirement? I think it can be a requirement in terms of changes in daily energy requirement of poultry or pigs over time or over different conditions. That's good, but that's a good exercise for modeling people, I think, today. What in practice you need for talking about requirements is to know what's the energy concentration of the feeds you are formulating. Most of the time, the simple answer about requirements, because most of the time the animals are fed ad libitum, so it's what should be the energy concentration of my feed. So for if you are happy, I would say, with your DE or your AMI approach for the energy concentrations of the feeds the complete feeds you are preparing for your animals, the simple way for predicting or estimating the net energy recommendation is to multiply the let's say the DE recommendation for pigs, for instance, or the AMI by 71% or by 74%. I think that's the average efficiency of a standard diet for the ratio between net energy and DE or net energy and AMI in pigs. That's the same for poultry. Let's say if your recommendation for a diet is 3,000 kilocalories per kilo of feed, your new recommendation in terms of net energy will be 3,000 multiplied by 0.74, which is the average efficiency of a standard diet for poultry or for broilers and for pigs. What is amazing at the end also is that the average efficiencies of diets are very similar in pigs and in birds. And I would say even in fish, there are different, most monogastrics are using energy very similarly, and they use ME or D for net energy very similarly. So very simple, you multiply your DE or your ME by a constant factor.
Thank you, Pierre. Do you want to add a comment?
Yeah, I think that to complete the comment of Jean, I would say to the audience that very nice work taking this this aspect have been already published. I think for broilers, for example, to a work from Dr. Swick from New England, or for swine with a work done by Hans Stein. And I would also add a comment that is maybe more a question as well, but why not take a chance of any system to try to find what are the extra requirements in non-standard condition, I would say, like under heat stress or under sanitary challenge and things like that. That's maybe more a comment or a question for the scientific the scientists around, but it could be a nice opportunity, I think.
Just to complete the point that was raised by Pierre, I think that should be less a question of feed value than requirements of animals. I think I can imagine that people are thinking about what should be the maintenance requirement, should they be changed according to the sanitary, according to the environment, and so on. So that's more a question of requirements than a question of feed value. So both should join at the end, clearly.
So we have a lot of questions on the practice, you know, on the practical switch from any to any. And for instance, Paul asked a question: any of ingredients is used in feed formulation, not any of the diet. However, the any value of the ingredient is often calculated using prediction equations arising from the composition from different series of diets and so on. Do you see then that those equations used in ingredients provide reliable values? I think it's the basis of a lot of development of systems, Jean.
I don't understand really the point, but because I think what should be done when you do this cost formulation is that you start from the energy values of your ingredients, and you assume that the values are additive, and the software will tell you what should be the combination of the ingredients in order to achieve an energy value, a targeted energy value of the diet. So I think clearly the energy value are additive, and you don't need to check at the end the energy value of the equation or the net energy of the diet. If you assume that the system is fully additive and you use only the one equation for calculating the energy value of all the ingredients you have in your matrix, the net energy value calculated by the additivity of the ingredients should be exactly the same as the energy value, the net energy value calculated on the full diet. I think I don't understand, unless I don't understand the point, but I think I don't see any problem there.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions about ingredients and diets. And for instance, there is here Edimar asking a question: any advice what to do when shifting from any to any? Where can I get reliable any values of ingredients?
Any advice? I think the point is that for that you need to get a net energy value of ingredients. That's you need to that. As far as I know, most recent, I say recent, I mean published over the last 15 or 20 years, feeding tables provide net energy value of ingredients for pigs, not for poultry yet. So in the case of pigs, INRAe tables are producing net energy, Brazilian tables are providing net energy, NRC 2012 is providing net energy, FEDNA tables, CVB tables. So most, I would say, big tables used for pigs are providing net energy value of ingredients. So that's the point. In the case of pigs, I think I have one interesting comment to give. I think you can slide number 29. Sometime a few years ago, we produced a software that is able to recalculate and to correct, I would say, the energy value of any ingredients that is available in the world for recalculating its net energy value. So that's one example. So clearly, the information about net energy of ingredients is available in feeding tables, one thing, but the feeding tables provide, I would say, fixed net energy values for one ingredient. And everybody knows that each ingredient has variable characteristics over time and so on, or between silos, between ships. And so it's important afterwards to try to have some correction or some adaptation of the energy values according to the actual composition of the ingredient. And so that's where, in the case of pigs, the EvaPig software is able to recalculate. In the case of poultry, there is nothing really equivalent yet, apart from, I would say, also one slide number 30, which is a production of the French feeding tables of database on the feed, and this software, which is just coming. I mean, it's not fully finalized, but it's close to the end. I think provides net energy value or ME values in the case of poultry according to the chemical composition of the ingredient. So clearly, there are a lot of values. So the question was more general. I think if you want to move from ME to net energy, the first thing is that you need net energy values of ingredients. But afterwards, how to do that? I think that's rather easy. You can recalculate or estimate your net energy values of all your ingredients in a matrix according to the equations or according to the feeding tables and so on. And one thing is that at the beginning, you shouldn't formulate according to net energy immediately. I think it's better to keep on formulating on the software you are using, or the principle or the system you are using, TME, AME, AMEN, and so on and so on. And afterwards, you get the net energy value according to what you are using, but progressively you change, you look at the net energy values you are obtaining, and progressively you change to net energy value system. So we could spend hours on that in order how to move from ME to net energy, from DE to net energy, but I would say that's very easy. And you should be confident on the net energy value equations which are available both for pigs and also for poultry or for broilers recently, and even laying hens. So the information is getting more important and more available, and that should be easy to move to net energy in all cases. So maybe Pierre has some more other aspects.
We will need a new version of the tables with the net energy for poultry too. There is a lot of questions on how to practically implement the things. And Claire, for instance, asked a question. If I want to move from ME to ME, system information, what is the first thing to implement? What is your advice?
I think that's the question I answered just before. Maybe my answer was very long. So what you need first is to establish your net energy value of ingredients. So you have to choose one net energy system, one net energy equation that is available, that has been validated. For people interested in that, I can give some advice. That's up to them. But clearly, the choice is rather limited anyway. So the point is to get net energy value of ingredients in your matrix. So that's the first thing to do, clearly. You cannot use a net energy system without getting net energy value. But what is important at the same time is to use that opportunity of moving to a net energy system to update the DE or the ME values of the ingredients you are using. Because I have seen so many times in my trips that many people don't adapt their energy values according to changes in chemical composition, according to changes in technology of the preparation of the ingredients and so on. So it's very important before moving to net energy to be sure and to be very clear and confident about the DE or the ME values you have been using so far. So the first, I would say the first point would be before moving to net energy, to be sure about the DE or the ME predictors.
Good point. We have a lot of questions also on the requirements again, so the animal side, and I think it will be the topic for the next part. So I just remind you, there is a poll now for the second part of the debate, and you can answer to the questions just to follow how you get into this debate. So the last part is now the key questions, the benefits and the consequence of any, to assess performance, to assess the effect of additives and so on, to develop sustainability and so on. So we've got a lot of questions. And just before I said, one of the key questions on the NE system from different people from different parts of the world is the animal part. So for instance, do you think it is necessary studies about any requirements, maintenance? There is some people knowing very well your work, Jean, asking the question about what about any for piglets, for instance? Let's say animal from post-weaning to 15-20 kilo. I can just show the question from Raphael here. Any progress in determining any for piglets? Let's say animal from weaning to 15-20 kilo. And that's a question. And the same way, I've got a question from gestation and lactating sows, for instance.
Oh yes, I think the literature on these aspects of energy values according to body weight, to stages of production, and so on, is documented. It's more documented in pigs probably than in poultry. I think, for instance, I just if I have a look at the slide number 20, I have probably shown hundreds of times in the over time. Slide number 22, sorry. On that slide, I clearly indicate that the energy directivity in pigs is quite different in growing pigs and in other pigs. In a way that when you have very fibrous diets and very fibrous ingredients, you have a big difference between other pigs and growing pigs. So the question there was about piglets. I think piglets are probably very close to growing pig, and lactating sows, I think that was also included in the question, are probably rather close to other pigs. So in the principle or in theory, there should be as much energy or as many energy values as you have stages of production in the case of pigs, but you have to be very practical at the end. I think you cannot provide an ingredient, I mean today, maybe in 10 years time, I think that should be a big progress and a good progress for the future. But nowadays, I think you have to split between, at least in the case of pigs, between two major stages of production. So in the case of broilers, I would say that, or poultry, I would say that that should be the same. I think the slide number, I would say the slide number, let's have a look, 23. The slide number 23 indicates that the energy directivity, or the metabolizability here, is a bit different between roosters, broilers, and laying hens. So the difference is not that big between the two main stages of production, broilers and laying hens, but it is significant. So that means that the ME values in broilers should be a little bit, or the ME values in laying hens should be a little bit higher than in broilers. I mean, roosters, they are not raised for production, but they are a good model anyway. But what we should be careful is that many ME values have been obtained in roosters. So that means that roosters represent maybe some overestimation of the actual ME values of feeds when fed to broilers and layers. But at the end, afterwards, when you talk about net energy, clearly net energy is calculated from an equation. So in the case of pigs, we showed that the net energy equation is applicable at any stage of production, including adult sows and including pigs varying in body weight between 50 and 150 kilo body weight. So you can use the same equation in the prediction of net energy, but you have to use different predictors for in that equation in terms of DE content, which will be different between sows, for instance, and growing pigs. And that should be also the same for in the poultry field, but that is not yet fully documented.
Gail, you want to add something?
Yes, I just want to complete the answer of Jean and to answer to Raphael. The question was also based on requirement, and I pointed out that for requirement you still have to take the requirement that you have in ME and apply a coefficient, so 71 for pigs to get the requirement for pigs at any stage.
There is a lot of question about the economical value and the benefit of moving from MED to ME. But from both of you, Jean and Pierre, can you just summarize what could be the benefits classically and depending maybe on the type of diet composition, moving from ME to ME?
I would say that the first benefit of moving from DEME to net energy is to get a more precise and more representative energy predictor or energy estimation of the true energy value of the feed. So that means that according to and that has been illustrated a lot in the videos, clearly when you have a good estimate and of the true energy value of feed, you have also a good estimate of the response of the animals behind. So basically, the major point of using a net energy system is to be closer to the true energy value of the feed, and also then to the true response of the animals behind that. So that's the major point. Afterwards, from an economical point of view, I think clearly net energy value may provide cheaper diet sometimes, but also sometimes the diet will be with the same cost as with the DE or the ME. That depends very much on the context, the price of the ingredients, the price of. Clearly, I just want to show one example in the slide number 16 that was prepared. We can see that when you move from a net energy from an ME system to a net energy system in pigs, according to the cost or the price of soy, the one major consequence of moving from ME to net energy was to obtain a lower CP level in the feed. So by doing that, you reduce the CP level in the diet, and you get, I would say, greener diets. That is quite interesting these days. I think that's one point. But the price, I mean, the consequence is quite different. And the price could not be higher, because on average, you get a better accuracy of the true energy value of the feed, a better response, more consistency in the response of the animals and so on. So the price is never higher, but it can be lower sometimes according to the price of the ingredients. And in that case, changing from ME or DE to net energy is affecting a lot the CP content of the diet. So that means the level of inclusion of amino acids, of synthetic amino acids, will change. So the price of the amino acids is a major determinant for using a net energy system and getting cheaper diets.
You want to comment on the poultry side, maybe? Yeah.
No, I think that the trend will be similar in poultry than it was in swine. Maybe the differences, and as I talk especially in the CP reduction, will not be so important because we saw already a lot of publication that suggest that you cannot reduce the CP content of poultry diet as it was done previously for swine. But I fully agree that any system for poultry and for swine are a really sustainable method for improvement of profit and of the planet and the pollution issues with animal production. And overall, you increase the animal protein production sustainability.
There is a lot of questions also about the way any can help in not modeling but predicting the best performance of the animal. What is your both feeling on that? So the adequation between ME and performance compared to ME or DE and performance?
I think I already answered to that point in the videos where I show different a few trials, but there are plenty indicating that clearly net energy was a much better predictor of the performance of the animals, especially if you work with diets or you have to play with the fat content of the feeds or the protein levels in the feed. I mean, if you have some opportunities to include fat, or you have also opportunities or constraints or legislations for changing the CP levels of the feed, clearly you need to move to net energy. I don't want to repeat what has been said in the videos, but clearly net energy is the best way to predict performance. In the case of developing models, yes, that's the same. The models should be based on net energy. And for instance, the models that have been produced by INRAe, the name is INRAe pork, were based on net energy. You cannot ignore that very important step in energy utilization, clearly. That's the only way. And this net energy probably will be improved in the future, I guess. And you need that net energy inclusion in these models, and probably I guess that net energy will be improved also in order to improve the models.
Thank you. Jean, maybe Pierre, you wanted to add something on that point.
Yeah, I think that just to complement on the poultry side, for sure, swine is much more in advance compared with broilers. I think especially in the modeling purposes, like INRAe pork is a very well model for animal prediction in swine. We do not have yet similar tool in poultry. But to share an experiment, we made some performance with ME and any system in broilers, and we saw that the capabilities of any to predict animal performance were 2 times higher in any system compared with ME. So there is a very important potential on that.
Thank you. There is a related question on that. Rob has a question. Current broiler genetics respond much more to amino acids than to energy. How does that fit with any into the link with broiler performance?
I think that's very embarrassing questions. Clearly, yeah, I accept that animals respond to maybe more to amino acids because I mean the birds are selected, they are raised for depositing protein, and so clearly amino acid supply is a very important pusher in the system. So I think again that that's the general trend, is that for evaluating the energy value, the true energy value of feeds, it's better to be as close as possible to that true energy value. And clearly, ME is quite far from the final energy utilization of energy. So it's better to move to net energy in order to only to be closer to the true energy value of the feed. And so if you are getting closer to the true energy value of the feed, you can predict and or the performance much better than if you are using a system that is affected by the dietary nutrients which are contained in the ME. So the biggest advantage of net energy is to take into account the specific effects of nutrients which are included in the overall concept of ME. So ME is good. It may depend in the case of poultry on which ME you are using, but clearly you should move to net energy as quick as possible.
Just take as an example, we have several questions on the feed technology, the link between ME, the denomination, and feed technology. And just as an example here, one from English, do you have any results on the influence of hydrothermal processing of certain raw materials like barley, for instance, on the ME content in the processed barley or the processed grain? And I've got several questions on the feed treatment, pelleting, hydrothermal conditioning, and so on.
Okay, let's move to slide number 25, where that's an example. Slide number 25. Yes. First, the principle is that pelleting, or technological treatment, will firstly affect the DE or the ME values. That's the main purpose of any technological treatment, is to change the availability of the nutrients within the gut. So it will affect the DE or the ME, or maybe the rate of passage, or the the availability of starch in quicker and slower, and so you will change the first what occurs within the gut. So that means that the DE or the ME, as illustrated on that slide here, where we compare mash and pellet, clearly the pelleting, for instance, or any extrusion or any thermal and physical treatment will improve usually the DE or the ME values. So far, I think we have to accept that the DE or the ME is changed according to the mode of presentation or the mode of preparation of the feed. And you can use only the same equation for calculating the net energy according to this new DE or ME values produced by the technology. Maybe for the future, and that's the same for enzymes and for probiotics and also for all these additives, maybe that's a new area of studies. I think maybe the metabolizability or further the metabolic utilization of ME will be also affected by this technology. But as far as I know, there is very little information about the impact of technology on the so-called K value or the ME, the efficiency of ME for net energy. I think it will be already a great step, a great move to include in your matrix, in your feeding tables, different energy values, DE or ME values, according to the technology, or according to, technology in the feed mill, but also technology as some additives, effects, and so on, in the matrix. And so far, because there is no more information available, you can use the same equation, but with different DE or ME values.
So clearly more work to do. And Pierre, you want to add some points on that?
Yeah. I think that it's a large area of science that we have to build, and I would also stress that I fully agree with Jean that in many situations we have feed formulation matrix with values of ME, and we even don't know if the values have been measured with a methodology of animal feeding using either mash or pellets, and that, as you can see, may affect in quite a large way the values already of DE, ME of the ingredients.
I think now we are also having quite a lot of questions about any evaluation of additives and so on. And for instance, I will take one of the recent questions here from Ronnie. How can we determine the any value for poultry to synthetic amino acids? Can we do it with any equation developed for diets and ingredients? Is there any, because clearly there is a lot of question about the additive any value.
Yeah, I think I already answered for the synthetic amino acids at the beginning of the webinar. I mean, for instance, in the INRAe feeding tables and in different documents, we have indicated the way to calculate the net energy value of synthetic amino acids in the case of pigs. I think we can do the same for poultry. But anyway, as I stress on that point, it's impossible technically to measure the net energy value of synthetic amino acids in order to validate the calculation with some hypotheses that have been done for pigs, and that the same hypothesis could be used also for poultry. So if the person has a question, a specific question about how to calculate the net energy value of synthetic amino acids, he may send me an email and I will tell him how to obtain these values.
Yeah, sure, you will have to answer to many more questions, Jean, when I see the list. Sometimes I try just to pick up some example. There is also a series of questions on the animal parts. And for instance, quite an interesting one here. Here from Lamia, how can we use this methodology, any, for measuring the energy cost of other physiological mechanisms, like lipid metabolism, inflammation, and we have questions also on gut functioning and so on. Is that a good way, net energy, to measure that part of the physiology metabolism of the animal?
I think the problem is not net energy per se. It's the problem of using that technology, which is indirect calorimetry. The indirect calorimetry principle consists in measuring either the total reproduction over the day, but I think you should also look at the dynamics of feed production over the day according to different events occurring within the animal. The feeds, the body temperature, the change in immunological levels and inflammation. So looking at the dynamic is very, even the physical activity of the animal. So it's, from my point of view, the indirect calorimetry has been used for different purposes. One of them is measuring the net energy value of feeds. But I would say 90% or 80% of the interest of indirect calorimetry is to look at what occurs within the animal for independently of the feed. And that concerns what are the requirements on a basic and control and a very nice situation. But all the main interest is to be able to simulate conditions where the health status is getting a bit bad, or the temperature is changing, the health status is changing a lot, and the dynamics of the nutrients in the gut is changed according, let's say, technology, for instance. So clearly, indirect calorimetry is good, and I have visited a few facilities in the world working using indirect calorimetry. But what I would say, or what I would suggest, as an old guy in the area, is to say that don't use your indirect calorimetry measurements to produce net energy value of ingredients. Use your indirect calorimetry equipment for looking at the response of the animals in terms of feed production, changes in metabolism, and dynamics of metabolism during the day, during a week, during production stage, over time, and that will be much more profitable for science and for application afterwards.
Good point, Jean. Pierre, maybe.
Yeah, I would just add a comment, and I fully agree with Jean Noblet, and I would say that to all the scientists around that I think that we do not dig enough in the area of human nutrition or human health, and for sure in hospital, in direct calorimetry is already used to evaluate the cost of disease for human, and there is many studies looking at the impact of some disease on the heat production of human, and I think that it's an area that we have to consider in our future research in animal nutrition or in animal science.
So we have lots of questions again on other additives. For instance, a question here. What about the effect of fiber degrading enzymes on any of ingredients? I know that you targeted that some time ago, Jean. Maybe you can.
Yeah. I think in the videos, as far as remember, because that was produced some time ago already. We had a slide on a trial that was conducted somewhere in Asia, looking at the effect of the addition of enzymes, NSP's enzymes, on energy utilization. Both that was done in broilers, both at the ME value and also at the NE value. As far as I remember, what we obtained was clearly that by putting enzymes in the feed, we improve a little bit the ME value, as many that has been demonstrated and shown and obtained in many trials so over the last 10 or 15 years. Which was interesting is that the K value, or the net energy over ME, was also improved, not to a very high extent, but what was at the end, the point was that the combination of a higher ME value and a higher K value of the ME produced a net energy value with the enzyme supplemented diets, which was significantly higher than the diets without the enzymes. So again, there are some opportunities today to look at first at the net energy value of I would say normal feeds. But I think most of the improvement and most of the work to be done in the future for net energy and the use of indirect calorimetry should be concentrated on these specific effects of some additives or some substances that are added to the feed, and they may change the DE or the ME value. That depends on the species you are dealing with, but also they may affect the ratio between net energy and ME. So clearly, yes, there is some interest in using the net energy and the indirect calorimetry technique to look at these specific effects of, let's say, enzymes or probiotics or any substance that will affect the gut health and that will affect the microbes, microbiota in the gut.
Okay, I see you going to.
Yeah, I agree with Jean, and in NSP enzyme area, we have focused a lot on the capabilities of this product to release some nutrient from the feed, but we have not expertised that much the impact of this on the cost of the digestion process, and I think that it's an area still to explore. And I would add the comment that it's also an area to explore for probiotic, prebiotic, and many other additives. And for sure, this is a virgin area of science, or quite.
So I think we have a lot of questions, but don't worry, we will respond to all the questions. Maybe to end the debate, because we are already past the time, I will take the last question, for instance. how do you expect the ME to change in the future, and considering the change in genetics, selection for leaner types, higher efficiency, and so on? Would that be more important than what we have faced before with ME and DE, for instance?
I'm not very concerned about the impact of changing the genetics on the DE or ME or any change. I think we have shown in different studies in pigs that the K value wasn't changed much according to the genotype of the pigs. And anyway, if there would be some change due to genetics, when we are dealing with energy value of feeds, and we are dealing mainly with energy value of ingredients, we are interested in getting a hierarchy between the ingredients we have in your silos or you can buy. So whatever is the absolute net energy value of a feed, maybe due to some genetic change, if as far as the hierarchy between the feeds is not changed between different genetic lines, I don't care. What is important is ranking the ingredients, and net energy clearly is a better way of ranking the ingredients than ME. I mean, the problem anyway is the same with ME. Should change the ME, should the ME value change with genetics? Yes, maybe. But I prefer to consider the net energy value instead of DE or ME first. And if the ranking is not changed according to genetic level, I don't mind. So maybe my answer is not very clear, but clearly I want to mention that don't be disturbed by the rapid changes in genetic levels. What is important is getting a good energy system that ranks correctly. Even the absolute value may be changed a little bit over time with genetic level changes.
Good point, Jean. So we have largely overpassed the initial time allocated to our webinar, but I'm sure that you all join me and agree that the topic was quite exciting, and we've received so many questions that we could not answer directly. Don't forget also the last poll of today's webinar. So you go on the poll section and you can answer to the questions. And now it's time to close and to thank Jean Noblet and Pierre Cosanet for their excellent contribution. And I would say also to thank all of you for your questions and interaction. And you will see in the response that we will group the topics and so on. It's very interesting to see how many people from different parts of the world are asking questions regarding similar issues and so on. If you have not watched the series of short educational video on net energy, I just say, just go on Feed Channel and you will be able to recheck the basics and so on, as explained by Jean. And we continue that idea of short educational videos, and the next one will concern palatability. So to everybody, best regards, take care in this so special sanitary situation, and see you next time in a couple of weeks. Thank you guys, thank you everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.